What we'd like to see happen is, I think you'll have to ask each person. And from week to week and day to day, of course, we all have different agendas. But I think we're all united in feeling that Canada doesn't need to be involved in the messaging that's happening right now in Afghanistan. We think that was a complete mistake for Canada to get involved. There were too few troops sent to make a difference anyway. They're completely being sacrificed. The objectives of the beginning of the war had nothing to do with Canada's security. It was an American-led war. The Operation of Enduring Freedom still runs as a separate combat mission. It's not under the control of NATO forces or UN forces. And Canada's involvement has really confused and completely changed what Canadians thought their armed forces were for. Would you agree with that, Frida?
Yeah, well, we don't belong. We have no right to tell another country how to live. How would we feel if people came over here? We would be fighting for our rights right here in Canada. And we are going over there and telling another country what their lives should be. While we may disagree with what their policies are, we're not. We have no right to tell them. It's up to the people within the country to do it. And with regards to saying that they're going in to save the women are in just as bad a shape as they were under the Taliban. There's maybe in the cities there's a little bit better, but throughout the country it's not any better. And in Iraq, it's got worse. Before we went in, Iraq was a pretty cosmopolitan country, and now it's become a fundamentalist country.
Do you think there are any lessons that you learned during the civil rights movement that we could use today to help bring about a change?
Oh, getting involved is a big lesson, and that's one of the things that made a difference, that a lot of people who had not been involved personally in that kind of situation saw what was happening and were willing to put themselves to inconvenience and risk to bring about a change. So I think that on an expanded scale could help in a lot of things if one gets in there before they get too entrenched in nobody's going to stop a war in the middle of it just because somebody comes along and says nonviolence would be better. You have to work at the situation from get-go, back before it gets to that stage. And that was one of the good things about the civil rights movement, in that there was a lot of grassroots work being done, which was there to bolster Martin Luther King and others when they did more spectacular things. But there were people already working at it to be called on, and who'd already built up some sympathetic groups in their communities.
What would you recommend that one does to stay encouraged when faced with adversity, or even when things seem that they're not going to change?
Persevere. Try to convince more people. Make it publicly known. Don't just persevere quietly. Find enough people that agree with you and use some creative thinking of how can we get this message out. Certainly environmentalists have done it in all sorts of creative ways, and that's the way to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right now there is a group of people that have been meeting every Wednesday outside the legislature building in Victoria, and they've been meeting protesting the war in Afghanistan since 2001. Do you have any words of encouragement for them?
Keep it up. Yeah, it's discouraging when you feel that nobody's paying attention and it keeps on going and going. But I think that what, for me, keeps me going is to think that, think of slavery, how long it took between the time the first people were convinced slavery was wrong till slavery was finally abolished. It's not abolished everywhere in the world, but it was at least abolished, in Canada and the U.S. and Britain and so on. Apartheid in South Africa. There are all kinds of examples that we can look at and say, yes, it took a long time, but look where we are now. And then, of course, there are plenty of times we can look and say, but we're not where we ought to be yet. Keep at it.
May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
Although most Canadians' lives are peaceful, we are a country at war. And according to most polls, Canadians do not want to be involved in wars and believe we should not be in Afghanistan. What do you think? You can add your opinion on our nowpolling.ca site. You can go to our nowpolling.ca and add your opinion. Just go to nowpolling.ca and look for Foreign Affairs under Federal Issues. Remember, participation is the essence of direct democracy.
Go now in peace.